So they had spiffs and, you're selling the sundries and what have you. And that was my bread and butter, I was like, oh, I see you got these awesome new shoes. And depending on who you're talking to, you got to know your audience, right? You don't want to be cutting down dad who's paying for everything. But you got a younger dude. I'm like, man, you got these brand new shoes. Are you going to put them on those socks? And it's like, oh, yeah. I should probably get some new socks. I'm like, just in luck, man. I got you.
You know what the best feeling in the world is, sir? Is brand new shoes that wrap around brand new socks.
That's right.
There's no feeling quite like it.
No idea.
It's like a foot massage.
That's right.
You don't have to pay any extra for it.
That's right.
Should we go ahead and throw that in?
It's so good.
You want to go with 2?
Yeah.
2? Yeah, let's go with 2.
Yeah. You need every color, so
That's
there's
right.
4. So.
Did you want a pair of shoes for every day of the week? Why don't we just go, there's nothing quite like having Wednesday shoes.
That's
Thursday
right.
shoes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. The art of the upsell.
From the business capital of the world, the Big Apple, New York's Middle Tennessee, it says here. Sounds riveting.
Yeah.
This is the Mostly Middle Tennessee Business Podcast, a podcast about Middle Tennessee business owners and professionals. Mostly.
That's right. Thank you, Mr. Matt Wilson from the Mostly Marketing Podcast for voicing the intro. This is the Mostly Middle Tennessee Business Podcast, where we talk to mostly Middle Tennessee business owners, professionals, and entrepreneurs. It's a real conversation, so there will be tangents, rabbit holes, things of that nature. Don't be surprised by that, but it is somewhat structured. Check us out. We are a video and audio podcast. You can see more at MMTBP.com. Find past episodes. Apply to be a guest. See some of the clips, all that fun stuff right there. I am your host, Jim McCarthy, with JimMcCarthyVoiceovers.com, and it's your show.co, where you can get a podcast for yourself, just like this. That's what we do here. And have somebody with about 20 years in producing content, especially a majority of it being in radio, to help you out. That would be moi. And today, we've got a good friend of mine that I met through a networking group that meets here in Spring Hill and all around the Middle Tennessee area. The people that are behind this networking group have done an amazing job. And, networking works. Here we are. We've known each other, I'd say, about a year now.
Yeah.
Daniel Cruz. Not Danny Cruz. Is it Daniel or Danny?
Daniel, when we're in a professional manner, but Daniel works. I think the only one I have
is Danny Cruz.
Yeah, the only one I have a version to, I think, is Dan Cruz for some reason. It's good.
You have a brother named Tom by chance?
Yeah, it's good. Well, my ex-wife Penelope, with the last name, it's good.
So if you're listening to this, why you want to listen to it is, I think we're going to go down the road of, looking into how the profession of mortgages and mortgage lending kind of runs itself here in Middle Tennessee. Being in a commoditized industry, especially when you're in real estate, mortgage, insurance, how do you separate yourself and set yourself apart? We're going to be talking a little bit about that. And of course, your background and how you became, entrepreneurial, because being in a commoditized industry such as mortgage, real estate, you will have to think entrepreneurially. But in reality, credit to my friend Brian Covey, he calls it being an intrapreneur. Having those entrepreneurial factoids, those skills, but you're still working for another business, but you're still responsible for killing a need, bringing everything home, and eating what you kill, right? So we'll talk a lot about that as well. But talk about your background and how you kind of got bitten by the entrepreneurial bug. Was your family like that?
No, and it was one of those things to where I think our generation now is well into being adults. I think a lot of us would have wished that somebody would have said, hey, here's how you buy a house. Mm-hmm. Here's how you do your taxes. Here's how you do all the things that as adults where a lot of us are still trying to navigate. Yeah. And unfortunately for a lot of us, pride gets in the way and people feel like they know enough to be dangerous, and that's usually where it gets dangerous is when you're trying to take your own advice on something that you have no idea about or you have very limited knowledge. So when it comes to such a large, or if not for most people, going to be the largest purchase of your life or lifetime, it should be done thoughtfully and with somebody that you trust. So previous to that, I was actually in finance as well as a financial advisor, and it was a great opportunity. Just being honest, my lack of I guess you could say life balance. I didn't understand how to better balance between personal and professional. Left me and my family at odds, and it was one of those things to where something needed to change, and I was the person, or I was what needed to change. Yeah. So I stepped out of financial advising and just focused on one avenue of finance, and that was in the buying and selling and investing of real estate and property and what have you. So, but prior to that, no, my family come from a long line of just workers. We'll do whatever it takes to pay the bills.
What was your first job?
First job, actually on the books, I would say my first job was working for a retirement home. I worked in a dietary department.
Dude, me too.
Yeah, did you?
Yeah. I washed dishes.
Yeah. So I was
people puree.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
That's right.
I worked at, it was Bay Point. It's down in Florida. It was Bay Point Retirement. And
where in Florida was it?
It was in Pinellas Park, which, if you don't know, to the friends and family back in P Park, but Pinellas Park is just located north of St. Petersburg, Florida, and south of Clearwater, Florida.
I got you.
And some people know, but it was eye-opening. I was literally chomping at the bit to get my first job. So I had to wait 7 months because I was 14. As soon as I turned 15, which, by the way, I don't think I told you this, but my birthday was yesterday.
And wow, dude, happy birthday.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. I literally started the day after my birthday at the retirement home.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah, so real quick about that. The dining room was for all the residents that can get in and out on their own steam, even if they're in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
The second floor was for folks that were coming out of the infirmary, or maybe they needed some assistance. And the third floor was a locked floor, and that is where, some of the folks who were going through the beginning phases of dementia and Alzheimer's were stationed.
That was the two dining rooms for us. So we had one dining room for people who were mobile, they can get around, they still could conduct themselves, and talk to you and everything. The other dining room was just, there was, to put it bluntly, just waiting to die.
Right.
And there's no movement, and I think about that, and I tell my kids, if I am ever in that kind of a condition, just pull the damn plug, for crying out loud. There's no coming back from it.
No, right? And I will say that was the most lively floor, and that's the one that they put me on as a 15-year-old. You see some things that they look like, and they were other people's grandparents and parents, and it was just eye-opening. But it was a great teacher of compassion, because the people that worked there, they really did care. I mean, you hear these horror stories, and you're always, if you're looking for something bad in someone's industry, you're gonna find it. Yeah. But these people were professionals. But it was just one of those things to where, I learned early on, hey, this is how you conduct yourself when somebody is dealing with that part of life. Be a professional.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like that also taught me to enjoy that journey, because all these people, as a teenager, you're seeing them in their twilight years. And then I would think about the times like, but they weren't always here. They were, they had primes of their lives that they lived through that is yet ahead of me at the time, because I was 15 years old as well.
Right.
Let me ask you this. Was it like an exceptionally paying job?
No.
Really? Because ours was. It was like, it was $2 above what everybody else was getting, and like a highly in-demand job. It was $7.50 an hour, man.
Nice.
Back in 91.
Right. No. And I will say that, It did. It paid good, and it was close to my house. I didn't have a car. I was
Holy
only
crap,
15.
dude! So was mine.
Yeah,
It was like 8th of a mile away.
yeah. I was about 2 miles away, but I had a bike, so I rode my bike, and yeah, it was awesome. So
many similarities already. So, I mean, can I ask how old you turned yesterday? Or
44.
Okay, so not too much younger than me. So
Yeah.
first job was at 95, right?
Right.
So,
Yep.
yeah, I mean, I guess that kind of makes sense with the $7.50 an hour thing.
Yeah. Now, it was a great opportunity. It was a great way to, once again, it was learning. I learned about taxes, and I was like, hey, something's. It's like,
Well, who's robbing?
yeah. I was like, who's this Medicare person? But yeah,
Who's FICA? Why are they taking so much? What the hell? What is this?
this is ridiculous. Yeah.
Who's got it better than FICA?
Yeah, no doubt.
So for me, it was throughout high school, I had the job. I wish my father was always entrepreneurial. He had his own business, and I think he did his best to inspire that in me, but I think wanted me to learn what it was like to work for somebody else, trade your time for money, so on and so forth, because we did work for him. If he needed us to help him pull wire, put in phone systems, which is what he did.
Right.
Yeah, we would take our weekends or sometimes our entire summers and work with our dad. But once I got that was my second formal job. Okay. My first formal job on the books, like you were talking about, was an illegal job because I couldn't pull my papers to prove my age. So I worked at Foot Locker for 2 weeks when I was 14. Yeah. I sold shoes, man. That was actually
awesome.
good.
I can believe it. That's awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, I had a little bit of the sales bug early on, got out of working in a nursing home, and I sold rainbow vacuums for a season.
Nice.
That ended horribly. And, eventually I found my way back to the nursing home prior to me getting into radio.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, and I was in a full-time position as the head of, like, I guess not operations. I'm probably glorifying the title, but I was head dishwasher, which meant I also do inventory and all that stuff.
Yeah. Sanitation engineer.
That's a good way to put it.
Absolutely.
So you get out of, was this your high school job pretty much?
No. So yeah, I mean, that was my first, job. I was there for at least actually it was I started in 8th grade and then started going to high school. And then I started working for a European auto mechanic shop. Oh. My neighbor was the head mechanic, and I wanted to learn about working on cars, and it was awesome.
Did you go into that field eventually?
So I was there, and then we had my grandfather living with us, and he required some assistance, so I needed something with a little bit more flexibility. Mm-hmm. So I was still, in high school working there, and then a lot of my friends were working at this. It's closed now, but I think it's like a CarMax now. It was called Sutherland Toyota, and it was a car, well-known car lot, and we worked there and as porters and trying to wrenches as well, but moving the cars and also doing light tune-ups and what have you. So that was
a porter can rise up.
Yeah, that's right.
The dealership group I work with, Dream, who owns Mercedes-Benz of Music City and Ferrari here in Nashville. Right. They also own 2 dealerships, Coral Gables and Cutler Bay in South Florida, nice. The Woodlands, Texas, Baton Rouge, and Birmingham. So,
wow.
The guy who is the general manager and partner in the business in Baton Rouge I just needed a job in college, started as a detailer porter.
Wow.
And just stayed with it.
Wow.
And now he, owns a portion of the place. The guy in Coral Gables, or Cutler Bay rather, same thing, started 46 years ago.
Wow.
As a porter. And now he's the general manager of the dealership.
That's crazy.
Isn't that nuts?
Yeah. Well, they say you stick around long enough at the barber shop, you'll get a haircut. Yeah. We're kind of funny real quick. So I had left Sutherland Toyota after being there for some time.
You never sold cars?
No, I didn't.
Really?
Yeah. It wasn't on my radar. Nobody ever was like, I was still punk kid, 16 years old, and
good time to start.
Yeah, apparently. And now looking back, but then you know what? I went to go sell shoes, and
At a Foot Locker?
No, at a Famous Footwear.
Nice.
I went to Famous Footwear at a.
No wonder we get along.
Yeah.
You're not a drummer by chance, are you?
No. We've been through some of the same trials. But so I was there. It's no longer there. Bay Area Outlet Mall, and I remember it was just. I didn't sell cars, but I could sell some shoes.
Right.
And when they had the BOGOs or we'd have, your sales, what do you call it?
Yeah, like the sales events and stuff like that.
Well,
no. Clearance?
Well, no, the contest. Basically, they're like, hey, check it out.
Spiffs.
Yeah, spiffs, thank you. That's what I was trying to think of.
Yeah.
So they had spiffs and, you're selling the sundries and what have you. And that was my bread and butter, I was like, oh, I see you got these awesome new shoes. And depending on who you're talking to, you got to know your audience, right? You don't want to be cutting down dad who's paying for everything. But you got a younger dude. I'm like, man, you got these brand new shoes. Are you going to put them on those socks? And I was like, oh, yeah. I should probably get some new socks. I'm like, just in luck, man. I got you.
You know what the best feeling in the world is, sir? Is brand new shoes that wrap around brand new socks.
That's right.
There's no feeling quite like it.
No idea.
It's like a foot massage.
That's right.
You don't have to pay any extra for it.
That's right.
Should we go ahead and throw that in?
It's so good.
You want to go with 2?
Yeah.
2? Yeah, let's go with 2.
Yeah. You need every color, so
That's
there's
right.
4. So.
Did you want a pair of shoes for every day of the week? Why don't we go? There's nothing quite like having Wednesday shoes.
That's
Thursday
right.
shoes.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's
The
awesome.
art of the upsell.
Does your garage door sound like this? If it does, it's screaming for help. Call Incredible Doors, 931-348-DOOR. We're making garage doors in Murray and Williamson counties work better, sound better, and, spring better. We just make them incredible again. Incredible Doors in Spring Hill. When your doors springs break, you need remote reconnections, opener installation, or just about anything to do with your garage door, go to IncredibleDoors.com or call 931-348-DOOR. Follow us on Facebook for specials on maintenance visits, keypads, and other items. 931-348-DOOR.
We did that in the car business. There was the notion of getting first money, which is landing on the price of the car and what they're going to expect for that, but then shifting into essentially what we called setting up F&I, setting up the box, to all the different things that they could sell in there, because everyone, if you bought a car, you go into the box, and why do they call it the box? Because you're basically going into a box, and they shut you in to sign all the paperwork and stuff. But they're also going to try and package everything together. And but I was so good at selling cars at this point that you sold things that you believed in, and I was really good at getting to the customer to genuinely, I know that I had integrity, because that's the only way I could do the job and put my head on a pillow at night, was to do it the right way with integrity,
right?
And be honest and shoot straight.
Right.
And the more I learned how to shoot straight, the more successful I was. Excuse me. Oh, wow. That was fun. So I would just say, hey, listen, especially when I was selling Mercedes at the time, you're buying a really nice car. You might as well get some of the protections. If it makes sense and, adds, 20, 25, $30 to your payment, here's what you can probably get. Here's what I'd recommend, get the extended warranty, get the maintenance plan, because you get that, you're going to get preferential treatment. You'll have first stab at loaner cars. And you're also good if you're, leasing the car, you can residualize the actual maintenance over the life of the lease. So I knew all the different things on how to sell it. But literally, I wouldn't sell it if I wouldn't buy it myself.
That's right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, and I did. I would actually, to this day, I still buy those things.
No. And I think that's awesome, because at the end of the day, you can't sell what you're not feeling.
I'd rather the integrity of the relationship and not have to worry about who is talking badly about me to other people or throwing shade. I'd rather them, hey, I am in this for getting referrals. I want you, the experience you got to be mirrored to a family or a family member or a friend. Right. And that was my modus operandi, That's
the only way to operate. Honestly, at the end of the day, I'm not here for a transaction. I'm here for the relationship.
Right. So,
awesome.
So you get from selling shoes, what was your mainstay career for a duration in your adult life?
Honestly, so a large chunk of my my work history would be in hospitality. You know, worked a lot bartending.
Right.
So
that's a sales job.
Yeah, without a doubt. Yeah, I started out serving. It was kind of funny. I started out any other. You didn't work for Ruby Tuesdays, did you? But
no, I didn't. I never waited tables.
All right, good. But I started Ruby Tuesdays, and I was doing really well, doing just lunches and dinners, and they kept trying to get me to move to the bar, and I was like, no, thank you. It looked like God's waiting room around the bar, and I was like.
At a Ruby Tuesday, really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Just in Florida in general. But at the end of the day, I was like, no, thank you. And finally, after my friend and then the manager and then the bar manager and the GM was the final ask. And he basically wasn't asking. He's like, you're going to train on the bar. And I was like, fine. And I worked with a nice lady named Susie. We called her Susie Q. Mm-hmm. And I was just like, man, she only ever has like 10, 11 guys around the bar. It's going to be horrible money. And then she just gave me a little bit of a cut of what we had made. She goes, hey, for training, here's 20%. And you should know how to do math if you're going to be in that industry. And I started doing the math. I was like, she made $200 on this very slow shift. And she didn't seem like she did much. Somebody bought her lunch. And I was like, there might be something to this bartender stuff. So I started bartending there. I learned, and I wasn't even old enough to drink. I was probably, honestly, I was 18, 19 years old, and learned how to bartend there. And then it was off to the races. So I never had to do another job interview after that. Most of the people that I had worked with, once again, we talk about integrity, how you show up for one position usually equates to how you show up for every position.
Right.
So I had people that I had worked with previously that would be like, hey, I'm over here, you should come talk to the hiring manager. And I, would generally be like, hey, I appreciate the opportunity. And unless I had a need, I'd stay where I was. Yeah. And so on and off, I would say about 20 years in hospitality, mostly working as a bartender, but I've been a general manager a couple of times over. I've also been just your regular manager. I was a good manager, but I didn't care for it. I knew what...
You're a people person.
Yeah. Like don't shut me up in doing payroll.
Dude, you'd be great at selling cars, I think.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
Because a lot of people from the hospitality industry, especially who work for Dream, are from the hospitality industry.
Right.
The CEO was very cognizant and purposeful. I think when he opened up his Woodland store, he looked for people that were bartenders, wait staff, that kind of thing. Look, I don't care if you know about cars.
Right.
You're a people person. You know how to talk to people. You know how to relate to them. We could teach you how to sell them.
Right.
It's the attitude over the aptitude that matters. Right.
Agreed.
Constantly.
Yep.
So from that, did you kind of wander into the real estate industry from there, or?
Right. So we make the move to Tennessee, and ironically enough, because I spent so many years in hospitality, my wife was like, "Can we just try something outside of hospitality? No more bartending," because I worked a decade at a nightclub, you know, and coming home at 3, 4 in the morning,
burning the candle at both ends.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I was like, absolutely. And this is pre-kids. And I was like, absolutely. So when I first moved here to Nashville, the first 4 months were very rough. We moved in January, and by the 4th month, I was like, I think we might have to go back to Florida. I was like, I can't find a good paying job. And I did anything I could to succeed. And it was one of those things to where I was working some of these are local companies, so I'm not going to drop their name, but it was just one of those things to where it's like, I'm not that corporate guy who can just drink the Kool-Aid. And it was one of those things to where I just struggled with it, just being honest. And then finally, ironically enough, somebody had talked to my brother-in-law, and I went on to manage and be the general manager of PM restaurant, used to be down in the Belmont University area, and did well there. And from that, I actually got offered a position out in Colorado. So I'm out in Colorado, and basically I was the director of operations for a medical marijuana concentrate manufacturer. So
interesting. That makes sense in Colorado.
Yeah, exactly. You know, I had somebody here ask me, like, hey, I feel like I could trust you with my business out in Colorado while I run my other business here in Tennessee. Right. And I told him, I was like, that's not really my thing. And he flew me out to Colorado to learn what the business is all about, and is very structured.
Yeah, really.
No pun intended. It's highly compliant. And it's
so many puns.
Yeah, it was definitely highly regulated. And I mean, it was the most lengthy background check that I ever had.
I bet.
But we were selling the product, so I'd have to go to these dispensaries and sell them on what we were all about. And that really kind of, showed me what real sales were really all about. I didn't feel like selling shoes in high school or even like working behind a bar was really like sales. Yeah. This was like my first like real solid sales job. And I was the dude. Not only was I making the product in the lab and also, growing the products in the actual warehouse, but talking to these dispensaries, what makes you different than everybody else? Yeah. And we had a proprietary system, and that's what we sold on.
Was that kind of a commoditized industry as well, do you think?
Yeah.
Because I mean, it's a new industry.
Yeah. But
people are trying to figure out.
It's the green rush,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people.
The green rush.
Yeah, all jokes aside,
I just got that.
I was meeting ex-military, ex-police officers, retired police officers, retired military, and doctors and lawyers, and they were the owners. And then they had, their general managers were, bachelor degrees, MBAs, what have you. So then, but then the guys, the face that you see at the counter, those are the, hey man,
Was that on purpose?
Yeah,
it's like to fit the image?
Probably. But I didn't usually work with them so much. I was dealing with the decision makers, right? And sure, these guys, they needed to be coached on what the product was. So I had selling points and what have you. So it's a business like anything else.
Oh, yeah.
And then from that, the owners, they decided to part ways, and it was one of those things to where it's very lucrative when I was out there, and I had to kind of find out the next chapter. I had a baby on the way, already had one. So I actually I stepped into financial advising, and I kind of Tarantino'd it to where I started independently, and then I went with a large firm.
Right.
So the large firm was great on kind of honing the skills, and it was awesome. Great opportunity.
But I mean, a lot of that financial background, I would imagine, came from just, managing and stuff like that, and learning how a business works, reading a P&L, income statements, things of that nature.
Right. Agreed. Some of the, I think that sometimes a lot of people, they get in their own head on, I don't think I could do this, because they're not seeing that bridge the same way that you just said the bridge. Like, hey, if you can sell shoes, you could probably sell cars, or if you're a bartender, you can probably sell cars. I think that too many people, we let that negative voice in between our ears be the one that kind of shuts things down.
That's what happened to me.
Yeah.
I thought I was a Honda guy through and through. Yeah. Until I had a customer tell me, you could sell Highline. You need to do it.
Right.
And he sold cars once upon a time.
Right.
And I was on a test drive with him at the Honda dealership. And he was long out of the business since then, into something else. I think he was doing like overseas logistics and shipping and stuff like that. But he says, just by your nature, the way you conduct yourself, the way you speak, you need to go sell Lexus, BMW, Mercedes. And at the time, we had several other dealerships in the area that we owned. And, one of them was Mercedes, and I applied, got the job. And because, I just feel like I wasn't cut from that cloth. I'd walk into those stores, we'd trade cars from time to time, and we were the Honda guys. We felt lesser than, right? And to walk into the BMW place was like, oh man, this is kind of nice.
Yeah.
And never in a million years would I think of myself selling a Mercedes, on a full-time basis. And man, was I glad that I did.
Yeah.
Right? And it's just on the other side of that threshold of freer.
That's it, man.
And what you think you don't know.
No. And, the last thing I'll say about that is that, I was born in a pretty rough city in Ohio. So it was one of those things to where my mindset back in the day used to be like, who am I to tell other people what to do with their money?
Right.
When I came from pretty,
I don't know what to do with my own.
Yeah. I came from a poor background, and then we kept getting better, and that was it. My dad got better jobs. My mom eventually went back to work, and it was one of those things to where it wasn't exactly a rags to riches, but it was like, start at the bottom, we're about to the middle, we're good. So making it to the middle class was kind of a big deal for me and my family. So
right. See, I grew up that way.
Yeah.
We were I'd say upper middle class. My dad, I'm pretty confident he made over $100,000 a year in the 80s.
Wow.
So he might as well have been making, $500,000 a year.
Right.
But I didn't know the difference. I knew friends that were living less than what we had and stuff like that. I think my father made some decent decisions. It might have been luck. It might have been skill. I don't know.
Right.
I can't ask him that questions now that I want to know the answers because he's gone.
Right.
So, that's, if anybody's listening that still has your parents, you're not asking them questions.
Yeah.
Bad on you, man. Because you can learn a lot from them.
Yeah. And I think the parts of that as well is like, I think there's certain things that we saw that our parents did, successfully and unsuccessfully.
Yeah.
And I think that if you give them the opportunity to, I wouldn't even say, I feel like it's not being respectful by saying, explain yourself, but basically to hear their side of the story and, hey, here's what led us down this road, and here's what happened.
Yeah.
You might find yourself a lot more similar to what your parents were doing at your stage in life.
Now, are your parents still around?
They are. My dad who raised me is back in Ohio,
Mm-hmm.
and my mom's down in Florida, and they still talk, but we still have a great relationship, and we've had the traditional trajectory of a normal dysfunctional family. So
I don't think, was there ever a such thing as a functional family for crying out loud? My mom because that terminology came out in the late 80s, dysfunctional family.
Right.
And my mom would coin that to everybody else but us. And I'd go, Mom, what does a functional family look like?
Right.
We're dysfunctional too.
Right.
Okay. And that's the nature of, dare I say now sin.
Right.
But I kind of wish that I could, I wanted to ask my father a couple of questions. Hey, when you went through tough times, which I know you did, I was 15 years old and impressionable when the recession of 90-91 happened.
Right.
And he, had to contract the business from having its own footprint in Elmsford, New York. He had to lay off his entire staff, bring everything. We refashioned our basement into the business, the office, and it was just him. Yeah. He went from, he must have had 15 employees down to just him because he saw what was coming. And I would ask him, look, do you regret instantly contracting the business instead of doubling down? While there was blood in the streets, you kind of felt to go along with the crowd in terms of contracting everything.
Yeah.
And the only reason why I bring this up is in a past conversation I've had with Grant Cardone. I told him this story. He's like, man, if I was your dad, I would have doubled and tripled down.
Right.
And I'm like, well, it's easier said than done. I said, we were in the telecommunications industry, putting in phone systems. If a business is getting squeezed and you're looking for ways to kind of tighten your belts, you're not going to buy a new phone system for crying out loud. You'll get your mileage out of the one you have.
Right.
So I mean, or you will be there for maintenance and stuff like that. But he did try to expand the business into what we now know as IT.
Right.
So he was doing a lot more of that, network cabling, stuff like that. That was starting to emerge.
Right.
And a natural fit for that particular sect of the industry. But it was just too little too late.
Yeah.
And he would always tell me, he's like, the biggest a liability you'll ever have are your employees. And I'd be like, well, now I see where he's coming from now,
right.
But at the same time, I'm like, they still got to be an asset. Right. If you get an employee that's got attitude over aptitude, good attitude, right. You could teach them anything.
That's it. If you're able to be teachable, or if you're going to come in and let somebody know all the things that it's like,
so many things I'd ask him.
Yeah.
Yeah. So many. I tried asking my mother the other day. I'm like, hey, when Dad was turning 50, like kind of I am now,
right?
What was his mental cognition like? Because I remember him stammering a lot and struggling to collect his thoughts and express himself in front of customers, especially if he would get kerfluffled, he'd really get kerfluffled. Right. He would stammer a lot,
right.
And I find myself doing that from time to time. And I put into practice a lot of exercises from radio.
Right.
Slow down, pause, those kinds of things. Collect your thoughts before your brain starts going so fast your mouth can't catch up. And I was going to ask my mom, was he taking anything? Did he see anybody about it? And she's like, I don't remember him doing that. I'm like, you don't?
Yeah.
She's 82, so
right.
Who knows what she remembers?
Yeah.
She's forgotten more than she remembers now.
I hear him.
Yeah.
But, I think it might also be one of those things to where our memories, or like, here's how I remember it.
Yeah.
And maybe her thought was probably, a million miles on something else. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Yeah. But
her thought back in that day was, how do I keep my life the way it was in the 80s?
Yeah.
I want to come home at 4:00 and be done with everything and watch Oprah.
Yeah.
That's what she did.
Yeah, I do.
So you go from, you make the transition from Colorado into the financial advising industry. Right. How was that mentally? Because you said you had to kind of cross that threshold of fear,
right?
And even, imposter syndrome, dare I say.
That's right.
Right? Was that a factor?
Absolutely. Really? I appreciate you bringing that up, because it was one of those things to where, hey, I'm learning it, but in the same sense, I haven't been doing this for decades or even years, or what have you. And my thing was how am I? Because in the beginning, it's always 100% commission based, right? Mm-hmm. So, and with one kid on the way and one already growing up, trying to hold on to all your dimes and your nickels, it wasn't until I actually started buying my own, life insurance and investing in that I actually could feel like, okay, I feel like I'm qualified. That kind of like the same way you talked about, I wouldn't try to sell something to someone at the car dealership unless I believed in it.
Right.
I had to really literally buy into it and go, now it protected me and my family, and I am investing. Here's what I do. And people could feel that. Yeah. Even though I might have been a little bit on the younger side, they would still go, okay, like he can actually show me what he's really doing. If it's good enough for the actual advisor, maybe it might be a good fit for me and my family.
Right.
So, but imposter syndrome, that is one thing that I can honestly say that I got over pretty quickly, because I realized that I'm not the financial professional, not the fact that I can't be professional. It's just the fact that I don't do this very well. You know what I'm saying? Right. And it's just like, I can still be of value. I can still educate you on everything in regards to what you should be doing with your finances, or in my current case, on purchasing a home or investing in property. But I don't have to drive the $100,000 vehicle. I don't have to be prim and polished. I can be honest. I can be down to earth like me and you are when we talk normally. It's like, hey, I don't have to try to pretend anymore. But it took me years before I got there.
Yeah.
It took.
You got to get practice.
Yeah. Yeah. It took a mentor to really show me, because he is polished, but his thing is that he really was a friend and an unofficial mentor. He never knew he was my mentor, but I told him, I was like, yeah, you've always been my unofficial mentor. But it was one of those things to where like I would show up maybe wearing a pair of Dickies khakis instead of a pair of like nice Dockers khakis.
Slacks.
Yeah, slacks, right?
Slacks.
Right. And he'd be like, yeah, you jump on. You're gonna work on some plumbing or some electricity today? I was
so
like,
shoot some hoops after
this?
Yeah.
I was like, all right, point taken. And I did. I cleaned it up, and I got better. Not just cleaned up physically, but more so on the how I approached clients and how I conveyed to them, maybe this isn't the best idea. Let me show you why, instead of just taking my advice. And I kind of like math, like show your work, Yeah. And it was one of those things to where I got past that once me and him start working together, and then he leaves. And when he left, I was like, back to lone wolf. And I did really well that year because I was like, hey, nobody's going to do this for me but me.
Yeah.
And I was in a situation to where I wasn't liking the person that I was becoming. Right. I was spending more time around other people's kitchen tables during dinner time than I was my own, because that was nature of the beast.
Your back's against the wall. You got to make some money.
Yeah. So that's what led me out of being a financial advisor, was just the fact that I wanted a better balance of life. Mm-hmm. I wanted to learn how to be more present with my family.
Yeah. So, the conundrum of a financial advisor is, you mentioned it before, I could have probably driven the $100,000 car, but I didn't want to.
Right.
And I knew several financial advisors. One of them she's a good friend of mine, but for the longest time, she drove like this beater.
Right.
And I'm going, that's got to be such a conundrum, because if you show up in a very modest car, it shows that you're frugal. It shows, it sends a certain signal. But it also sends that, well, maybe you don't exactly know what you're doing.
Right.
And then you got the guy who shows up in the 7 Series or whatever. And it's like, okay, well, he does know what he's doing, but is he making this? He's making a freaking bundle off his customers in order to afford this thing? That's got to be such a sticky place to be.
No, and I felt that some of these guys. I think that's the difference, actually working for an office like that, and not just finance, but a lot of those offices, when you really get to kind of know where they really stand.
Yeah.
And, for my job, I have to be me and my client have to be very transparent with one another. And I always give them the same disclaimer. I go, anything that we discuss, it's between me and you. I go, but I do, just like you would your doctor or your attorney. I was like, I need you to be real honest with me. I was like, because, if we get too far down the road, we go under contract, or you're trying to buy another piece of property, whatever that is, and you haven't, disclosed to me that you're maybe in the beginnings of having some financial problems. I was like, it's going to pop up, and
it's going to be exponentially worse.
That's right.
When we found out, later in the process.
That's right. Let me help you before we get to that point. Yeah. And I have no problems with letting people know. I was like, I think maybe right now this isn't for you. Yeah. And whether that's buying that first home, or whether it's buying that 15th investment property, and just going, hey, this isn't my opinion. And I go, but let me show you why this isn't a wise move. And usually people will go, I didn't think about that. Hey, you know what? That's why we're talking.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Well, here's the thing, is that when I first met you, you had really loud glasses on. Yeah. And like neon green, large frames.
Right.
And is that your gimmick, you think?
So I've said this plenty of times previously. A lot of what we do is very, first, it's a little boring, right? But,
it's commoditized.
It's commoditized, right? Exactly. But at the end of the day, it's very serious. I'm dealing with other people's livelihoods. If I make a mistake that is something that you can't come back from, I'm costing a family or individual thousands of dollars, and this day and age, probably maybe millions, right?
Yeah.
And the disconnect is that I would never show up to a client meeting like that. I would never show up on a Zoom call like that. But when I'm around my peers, I need to just let them know, it's like, hey, I need to let my hair down for a minute. And if we're networking, I want you to know 2 things. One, it's just a joke, and we're just joking around here. I go, but I was like, if you actually sat down with me and we had a one-on-one, you would understand how serious I am about what I do and how I help people. And that's the difference, and sometimes it's really for the other person. Sometimes they need that disarming. They'll be like, oh, I can approach this guy. He's not going to try to sell me the moon, And, it is one of those things to where it's also, they open up like, man, I love your frames. Like, are those prescriptions?
Conversation piece.
It really is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing is that I've had a notion lately. I almost think it's detrimental if you show up too sharp dressed.
Right.
I call it Nashville casual, where you put like a shirt like this on, maybe a button down,
right.
even a t-shirt, with a nice jacket on. You could do the jeans and some nice shoes, and you look presentable.
Right.
That's good, like evening networking in Nashville kind of attire, which is kind of my armor when I do that.
Right.
But with the 3-piece suit, pinstripes, all that stuff, showing up constantly so polished, I almost feel like you're putting off the wrong signal, like you're overcompensating for something.
Right.
And it's funny, my business partner, he doesn't care how he dresses. His confidence comes from how he speaks, what he knows. I always say he's a business juggernaut.
Right.
And when he gets in front of people, he wows them because it's the quality of what falls out of his mouth. And as we're developing his personal brand, I said, he's already booked his first TEDx.
Wow.
Without even trying. Like it was just almost given to him. He booked another speech about a month ago with Spring Hill Chamber of Commerce.
Nice.
And when we were talking about him putting talks together, I said, you need to show up exactly how you are.
Right.
Hey, I slapped my shorts on today. I'm wearing flip-flops. The shirt was just laying on the end of the bed. This is, he doesn't put much into it. And a lot of brilliant people never did. Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, they wore the same thing all the time because I just don't want to think about it.
Right. One less decision to make.
And so he shows up and I said, the first things out of your mouth has to be, okay, I'm showing up looking like this. I don't look the part, quote unquote.
Right.
So what I have to say better be good, right? That's the thing.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think a lot of people rush to judgment. And I was just on a podcast yesterday talking about this exact thing. If you see somebody showing up looking not disheveled, it's not like he looks awful, but you don't look like all the other people, I think you need to give them more of your attention because, okay, you better have something good to say.
Right. Yeah.
Right? Same thing in this case.
Yeah.
Your confidence in your commoditized industry could also be, it's your differentiator, but it's also your how you show up as I wrote it down. That's a nebulous, subjective concept. It's how you show up.
Right.
That could mean, the words that fall out of your mouth. It could be your beliefs. It could be your core values, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Right? So, in that case, in the beginning, you got to show up at least looking the part.
That's right.
Because you're still learning.
That's right.
But once you know your stuff, I can kind of run from there, right?
Agreed. I've had the pleasure of being able to work with some amazing realtor and referral partners over the years, and it is one of those things to where and nobody would know because they're so humble about it, how successful they are. But it's maybe a buttoned up a polo at best, a pair of jeans, and maybe a pair of tennis shoes. Yeah. But I best believe when they go to take a client out, they are polished with the words that come out of their mouth. They know what they're talking about. And not just what they're saying, but how they're listening. Yeah. And I felt like that's twice the battle.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
You got 2 ears, one mouth. I need to be listening to you more. So if me being a little bit more casual helps you to open up to me more, and that's what I need to help you feel like you're disarming me, whatever it takes. You're only making one of the most significant purchases of your life. Why don't we make you comfortable?
Yeah. That was the thing about the Mercedes dealership where I worked. It was shirts like these, collared polos with a nice pants, nice shoes. Right. But that was about it, And prior to that, I guess they did do the not three-piece, but, suit, jacket, tie, button-down shirt.
Very involved.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, man, if it's that, I'm not interested. That's a monkey suit to me. I don't want to do that.
Right.
But, thankfully, by the time I got on board, now the dealerships where I just came from in South Florida, they are dressed to the nines.
Yeah.
And maybe it's the culture that they're dealing with. They kind of expect that.
South Florida, yeah.
It's glitzy.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
That Miami area.
No, it is. And it is one of those things where I have much respect for the people that pull off the every day that you see him, even on a Saturday and a Sunday, it looks like they polish their board shorts, you know, and you're
Right.
like, I got a friend of mine that
Iron their jeans.
I got a friend that irons his board shorts.
Really?
We were just talking today. He called me up to wish me happy birthday, and he goes, yeah. He's like, I was like, I thought you said you're going on the boat. He's like, yeah, I'm just ironing my board shorts. I'm like, still, huh? He's like, yeah. And it was just one of those things to where he fits that, right?
Yeah.
And I think that you need to show up the way that you truly are. And no matter what that looks like.
Right,
you know?
right. And, you know, I'm constantly working on my look. We just got a woman that came into our BNI. She's a member, and she's doing men's bespoke clothing, those types of things. And I've always wanted to get in front of somebody because sometimes you just don't. It's like getting a mentor to help you into what you want to learn, you know?
Right.
Fashion-wise, I've been clueless, you know, black shirt, you know, jeans. I wear, you know, nice looking, comfortable shoes.
Right.
Occasionally I'll put on, I've even got like behind me in my cabinet here, a pair of nice shoes if I ever need them on, you know,
Moment's notice.
I've never used them.
Yeah.
But, you know, it's one of those things that you just kind of, you figure out, and if you want to change it, you know, like for example, my hair, I just grew it back because my wife's like, you know, just try growing it out.
Yeah.
Because I rocked the bald look for, you know, probably 2 decades.
Right.
And, you know, didn't pay for a haircut and all that time. And then everybody else looking around me started doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's like a bunch of cue balls walking around.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I'll grow it back. I had a lot more hair than I remember.
Right.
I'm like, okay, that's kind of cool. I'm balding, but, you know, It is what it is. And then I go, well, you know, maybe I can rock a scally. You know, maybe that I can kind of evolve my look and being the scally guy.
Yeah.
You know Jim Morris? Does he ring a bell?
Yeah.
Yeah, Impact. In fact, he ran an event back in October. He's doing it again this year too.
Nice.
He shows up with a freaking scally. I'm like, son of a gun. I'm like, dude. And the fact that he's 6'5", he's got, you know, the stature. He's a good-looking dude.
Yeah.
He's younger than me.
Great smile. Nice guy.
Man. That was going to be my thing, you know? Guess I'll just continue
You can
rocking
still rock it. Your hair looks great.
It looks all right, you know. So you kind of get the side profile. It's thinning, you know, there's a little light showing through it.
That's good.
You know,
I got those widow's peak
the power
going on.
combs.
It's good.
Yeah, the power combs.
Yeah, exactly.
I have those too. Looking at it now.
Well, you
If
know
you're
what?
watching on video, that's what I'm looking
Mr.
at.
Smith.
But I mean, those things do kind of come into play, and people make snap judgments. For anybody that's listening or watching, you know, if you see somebody show up like that, there's probably going to be something powerful they're going to say.
Right.
That's going to really rock you. Maybe not rock your world, but at least get you to think.
Yeah.
Because anytime I see the guys that are really well put together, they got, you know, the shave in their head every single day, which, you know, that's a pain in the butt.
Yeah.
They're saying a lot of templated stuff. It's not impactful.
No.
Or they're trying to be shocking.
Right.
You know? At least on social media.
Trying to scare them. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
How do people find and follow you and, you know, reach out to you?
Absolutely. You know, 727-418-0422.
You want to do a phone number? You got a website or anything?
I do.
What is my website?
Yeah, what is my website? You know, honestly, you guys can always check me out on social media. Cruz, what was it? Cruz Housing Advisor.
I'm going to do the unforgivable and look up.
No, you're good.
Are you on Instagram?
Yeah, Cruz Housing Advisor.
Is it Daniel?
CRUZ.
Excuse me, Cruz. Let's see who come up.
Cruz Housing Advisor.
Cruz Incorporated Housing Advisor.
There you go.
There you go. I'm not following you. Now I'm following you now.
Cool.
So you got the hellocard.biz.
That's right.
And that's your main way to get a hold of you.
That's the best way to get a hold of me. And
we'll put that in the details. So.
Yeah. Speaking of the details, I just I gotta say, speaking of websites, went onto your voiceover website and
is it broken?
It was amazing. All I gotta say is that I don't want to spoil it for anybody. If you guys get a moment, Christopher Walken is all I gotta say, and you're welcome. And check that out. It is amazing. But I just want to say to you, like the range on that site alone is just. I'm sure a lot of you guys know that Jim does some amazing voiceover work, but if you guys get on that website, you will not be disappointed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What a testimonial.
And swear he didn't pay me to say that, but I will say that if you do nothing else but go on there for 5 minutes, please make sure that you check out the Christopher Walken
That's
clip.
about the extent of time that you'll need to go through everything on that website, because I've not really done much with it.
It was awesome.
Yeah, the Walken impersonation, speaking of commoditized, it's like everybody can do it now.
Yeah.
You know?
Now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They even had a commercial for the Super Bowl where and he was like, yeah, that's funny. Everybody's doing an impression of me. The Morgan Freeman. Was a very tough
That is
impression
a tough
to
one.
do.
Yeah.
Danny Cruz was sitting across from me. He couldn't hold him in there because his feathers were far too bright.
God, is that you?
The seventh at 7. And it's a really bad Morgan Freeman impersonation, but it's just an old man kind of talking like this.
Right.
And you can narrate pretty much anything that happens in life if you talk like this.
That's right.
I do this to my wife. My wife is, Courtney was walking to the refrigerator. In there, she hoped to find something that would satiate her hunger, but she would likely be disappointed.
That's awesome.
Riffing.
Oh yeah, my wife already. I mess with her enough. She'd be like, just go.
Stop.
You gotta go.
I mean, occasionally, if my voice is really in a good condition, I can do the, in a world, Courtney's going to the kitchen, and then in the kitchen, she's gonna find a game of cat and mouse. One person will come out alive. Come see the new movie.
What is it? It's one cinnamon roll, 2 people. Who will prevail?
Or even like, what's the impression du jour? You ever watch Frank Caliendo?
Yeah.
I
love that guy. Yeah.
And a lot of my impressions are other people doing impressions. I'm like, oh, okay, that's how it's done. I can't, God forbid I have anything freaking original. I got to look at other people and how they do it. That's Frank Caliendo was watching him learn how to do a Morgan Freeman impersonation.
So good. Yeah. But what was his best one was not Mike Dick, was the video game Madden when he does.
Yeah. Put one foot in front of the other. And I can't do Madden.
No, but Frank Caliendo is hilarious.
There was a guy, and a lot of people who are listening to this, if you're OGs in Nashville, let's say 05 to 10. And you knew Crest Honda, Crest Cadillac, those dealerships up by Rosa Parks. Right. The GM for those dealerships, Crest Honda, his name was Steve Brink. And he did I got to know him because he came in and did all the radio commercials for us, or for the dealerships. And I got to know him really well.
Right.
He sounded like John Madden.
Nice.
Hey, Nashville, come on down to Crest Honda. We're going to have a big old weekend. We're selling some balloons that come with cars, man.
Yeah. And hot dogs.
Yeah. We're going to have some hot dogs and popcorn. Make sure you come on down and check out the new Honda Accord. Comes with a free balloon.
Yeah.
We used to do stuff like that all the time. He was a great guy. Right. But man, so much fun. Much fun.
Yeah. You got to have fun, man. Yeah. Life's too short.
Life is too short.
Yeah.
You don't do any other impressions at all?
Oh, man. I usually just... I usually use other people's immediate material, right with them. And here's the thing, and I've gotten better over the decades because it used to be very self-deprecating, and then I realized it's like, it really is about what you put out. So I stopped doing that, and now, I don't pick on anybody, so I don't do that either. I never got much mileage out of that. The only people I really mess with would be like my own family members.
Well, I'd say you have an OnlyFans page or something?
Yeah, it's called Elbows Only.
It's all feet.
And exactly. If you guys,
I show my weenus on my OnlyFans
that's
page.
Right, folks. You got it. But and that's what allowed me to be here today, folks. But it really is.
Talk about a commoditized industry.
Yeah. When I did stand-up comedy before,
I didn't know you didn't mention that.
Yeah, back in Florida, it was just did some amateur nights, and it was awesome. It was terrifying.
Oh yeah,
yeah, very terrifying. But the whole thing was like I realized that I'm very much the situational entertainer, to where whatever we got going on right in front of us,
observational.
Yeah. So like Howard Stern is, to where
that's right.
Yeah. What's up?
That's right. That's right, Robin.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, exactly.
Gonna take my Howicopter out to the Hamptons, Robin.
Right. And just being able to kind of feed off of whatever.
I really want to see you naked.
Exactly.
Can you take your top off right now?
Oh,
I'm asking you.
Oh,
Howard. Oh, Howard.
Here we go again.
That is a semi-bad impersonation I can do as Howard Stern.
Yeah.
Hoo, Robin. And that's actually based off of Anthony Cumia's from Opie and Anthony. He did a great Howard Stern impersonation.
Really?
It was amazing.
That's
utterly
awesome.
Amazing. He did Tony Danza really well. Tony Danza, Thoughts and Prayers. And, Mona, Samantha,
Mona.
Angela. Hey, welcome to the Tony Danza Show.
Exactly.
Thoughts and Prayers.
Thoughts and Prayers.
See, this podcast meanders. We go off on offshoots and rabbit holes.
I love it.
Constantly.
Yeah.
So there you go. All your information will be in the description.
Absolutely.
If you guys want to reach out to Danny for anything financially related that you want to, have pick his brain and stuff like that, the guy's a great guy. You heard him here, and I encourage you to do so. Danny, thank you for being on the show. I really do appreciate it. Always a pleasure spending time with you.
Jim, I appreciate you.
And absolutely, I appreciate it, brother. And of course, you guys listening to the podcast, help us out, MMTBP.com. We're always going after that elusive 10,000 average downloads per episode, which is a long way off, but you got to put those goals out there, right? And if you don't have a goal, you don't know where you're going. So
that's right.
That's what we're shooting for in the next several years. We keep on doing this thing. We're approaching, by the time this episode's out, it might be beyond episode 200, but we're getting to another milestone.
Nice.
So you just got to keep on putting them out. And if there's anything that is worth sharing, share out the clips, share out all the different episodes. If you got somebody in mind that this would resonate with, let them know about it. Let us know about it. Give us a 5-star rating as well. Really do appreciate it. MMTBP.com. Again, Danny, thanks for coming on, brother.
Thanks, Jim.